in the Demirium.
The amulet mirror.
Ooh, look at Russell Lee. He is looking sharp this weekend.
Love someone in a sports coat. Makes me feel like I am really part of the player base still.
That turtleneck was really working for me, too. Players are underway here, though. Magalhaes with a tap breeding pool. Pulliam's going to fire off a Thoughtseize off a Blooming Marsh. We'll take a look at Magalhaes' hand. Looks like he does have that Nissa. And there's Corsair Crewfix, Satyr Wayfinder, and 3 lands, notably Ipnu Rivulet.
Yeah, and the big thing that we're seeing here is just... This is respect 1 for Nissa, and 2, Satyr Wayfinder has several looks at an Uro, and fills the graveyard for an early copy of the card. And also, having a ton of land drops is going to get you closer and closer to that ever-crucial Emrakul.
Pulliam decides that the low stuff is all kind of whatever and goes for the Nissa with the Thoughtseize. We'll go back to Magalhaes. Looks like the pickup was a checklist card. It's going to be Jace Vryn's Prodigy. We'll see if Pulliam can answer this one quickly.
Card combos wonderfully with Satyr Wayfinder, especially when you have a land-heavy hand. So you can get the spot where you can get extra loots in. You have a little bit more agency about when you actually transform your Jace, depending on when Edgar chooses to activate it. It just really plays nicely.
Pulliam's second land is Ipnu Rivulet of his own. He's going to fire off Satyr Wayfinder. We see an Uro milled over. Pair of lands, I believe, Tri-land and a Fabled Passage. Picks up the Fabled Passage and puts a Walking Ballista to the graveyard. So looking pretty delirious is Pulliam. Sorcery, Artifact, Creature, Land. Pretty quick getting that on turn 2.
And also close to actually being able to bring back Uro.
Some tension in that, right? The managing the card types in graveyard versus bringing Uro back.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes down to how much you think you need to prioritize Emrakul very quickly. And if you're, say, going to miss a land drop or something to that effect and you're a ways off still, then you may just be more interested in trying to develop something that's going to let you see more cards.
Going back to Magalhaes, he had the choice if he wanted a quick transformation. He's actually going to start with a loot.
I really like this sequence from Edgar here.
Yeah, follows up with Corsair or Crewfix. Looks like he looted away Uro, and rather than casting that, he goes for Corsair. We see a Fatal Push on top of the library.
And this is Edgar looking to play a more value-oriented game rather than necessarily focusing on big, flashy plays.
We'll see how quickly Pulliam can get online here. Another Thoughtseize. He knows about a Wayfinder, so it'll at least hit something. So we take a look at Edgar's hand. Yeah, Wayfinder or Traverse the Elven Vault and leaving a breeding pool behind. Kind of funny that this is a choice just because the Wayfinder turns on that Uro.
Yeah, it's a weird spot. I imagine we would see the Wayfinder get taken here because there's not really Delirium yet, and you can just flashback Traverse with Jace.
Yeah, Wayfinder is the take. Pulliam to 14 now. Here's another Satyr Wayfinder. His land for this turn was shocking for a breeding pool. It picks up an Overgrown Tomb off of the trigger. No attacks on 1-1 into 2-4, so we head back to Magalhaes. He'll draw that Fatal Push, and we see an island on the top of the deck. A lot of access to cards just with Jace plus Corsair here as you see him play the island.
Ooh, that's a big one on top now.
Yeah, Satyr Wayfinder there. Both players know about it, so we can loot right into that.
That does a great job of enabling Uro next turn. And there's even a spot where you can cast your Satyr Wayfinder, get the land, activate Uro, and then you're not forced to transform your Jace if you don't want to. Lot of ways to just kind of do tricks with this Jace Vryn's Prodigy.
He'll start with an attack with the Corsair. That's going to connect, Pulliam to 12. Magalhaes comfortably at 21.
Hard to feel bad when you're above the starting life total.
Often a sign of good things, not always. Ooh, Fatal Push on Satyr Wayfinder. He wants to transform the Jace, as you see him loot after that. That was the 4th card in the graveyard. He'll discard that breeding pool, and now the Jace becomes the Telepath Unbound. Some options here. You could just shrink the Wayfinder. That's all fine. Maybe flashback something. Before he does any of that, he'll cast Wayfinder of his own. Picks up an overgrown tomb. Another Jace Fringe Prodigy on the top of the library. That one not especially welcome.
It's a weird spot where it's hard to complain about drawing extra copies of your legendary Snapcaster Mage. Because even if it's a dead card, that just means the one you have on the battlefield is sticking around.
Very fair point. Jace ticks up to 6, so that Wayfinder's an 0-1 through this turn. Pulliam's going to use a Fabled Passage to find a forest. This is the 4th land. You see green, green, blue, blue. Yep, Uro is escaping. He has to take a point off the Rivulet, so he'll go to 11 and then up to 14 off of the trigger.
You know, I gotta say, one of my favorite things about Paper Magic is not having to see the Uro animation from Arena.
It is horrifying.
If I never have to see that again, I will still feel damaged as a result of having seen it the first time.
Pulliam draws a card and puts a Blooming Marsh on the battlefield and passes. Magalhaes is going to draw that Jace Fringe Prodigy, show another Satyr Wayfinder on the top of the deck. There is a Traverse the Ove involved in the graveyard, and he has an active Jace, so he might be thinking about flashing that back. He's going to consult the hand, which both players largely know the contents of.
Yeah, at this point, the big thing that you're looking at is how you can actually keep Pulliam's copy of Uro in check. Because even though it ate a bunch of cards in the graveyard, you know, Will's still delirious at this point, right? And every time the Uro attacks, just getting to develop an extra land onto the battlefield is going to get you closer to that Emrakul.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Magalhaes has the Courser. That one helps you hit land drops, so it doesn't give you anything extra, right? So he has a lot more work to do in the mana development department. So looking at using the Jace, you see a -3 here. It's going to be Abrupt Decay, get that Uro off the battlefield for now.
There is certainly a point where the second Uro is much harder to escape than the first one.
Yeah, very true. Courser rumbles in again, Pulliam back to 12. Magalhaes will deploy that second Jace. You can have a Prodigy and a Telepath. No rule against that. Plays Overgrown Tomb tapped, goes to 22. Back to Will Pulliam. Pretty full grip over there for Pulliam, plus the Uro in the graveyard.
Yeah, just looking at the battlefield, it's pretty clear that the squeeze on Pulliam at this point is development rather than raw card quantity.
Fabled Passage is land number 6. He'll fetch that right away. Finds Island. Also, card that's not Uro number 5 in the graveyard is the passage. And 4 mana means we're escaping again. No longer delirious, but once again with a big 6/6.
Yeah, and this is a spot where just looping your Uros is going to get you so far ahead in terms of development that Pulliam here is just trying to catch up with what Edgar's doing, right? Ultimately, these Jaces are good cards, but they are going to die to Uro at some point.
Yeah, even a -2 is not enough to stop something that large.
How wild is it? This is just speaking to the power level of Jace Telepath Unbound. When that card rolls up to 6, targeting an Uro, that means a 6/6 can't kill the 2-drop Planeswalker.
Jace is quite loyal. Right, so Uro is going to let Pulliam shock in an Overgrown Tomb and then cast a Courser Crucifix. Goes to 13 and shows a Tireless Tracker on the top of the library. Probably not too upset about that one. Magalhaes is going to draw. Sees another Courser on top, so he's had this Jace stuff going, and that's fine, but he's not hitting the highest power level cards in the deck yet.
Right, and there's certainly a tension in that Wayfinder doesn't actually find you these super powerful cards, and it looks like Edgar has also leaned a bit more into Planeswalkers this weekend. We see 2 copies of Nissa and a copy of Tamiyo, Collector of Tales, in the deck, which is not exactly a combo with Traverse the Ulvenwald.
So we'll start on the Satyr Wayfinder. Mills over that Courser, and the C3 lands. Gets his pick of those. I think it's Swamp, Watery Grave, Overgrown Tomb. Goes with the Tomb.
At this point, I would not be surprised to see Edgar recur his own copy of Uro.
Time to escape, you thinks. Shows a Traverse on the top. We know he has one in hand on top of that. So once he gets to enough mana, Magalhaes really gets his choice of doing whatever he wants.
Oh, how cute is this?
So the Jace is going to -3, goes to the graveyard, triggering Revolt for the Fatal Push it targeted. Is that what we saw?
Yes.
Nice little combo. And the other Jace is just going to go ahead and transform right away. Magalhaes draws that Traverse. We see another Uro on top of the library. Pulliam's going to help out with the logistics of getting the
Teamwork makes the
Planeswalker
dream
there.
work.
You love to see it. There is that Fatal Push. Uro down again, but now Pulliam's graveyard is pretty lacking. In fact, it's just the Uro.
And we see Edgar just prioritizing basically having access to Planeswalkers for the sake of continuing to snowball an advantage here.
And he's thinking about going traversing. Real quick, he's going to consult Pulliam's Exile. And here he does fire off a Traverse. What to get? He does have a lot of card types in graveyard, right? Courser there is an enchantment, creature, land, planeswalker.
I think we're at 5. I think we're missing instant, but have creature, land, instant, or not instant, creature, land, sorcery, enchantment, planeswalker.
Pretty good mix. Still has a land drop for this turn, too. Not quite in Emrakul territory just yet. There's also a big argument to not exposing that to Thoughtseize if you don't have to.
Mm-hmm. The bright side of that sort of squeeze is that we actually see a copy of Grapple with the Past in Edgar's deck, which is a way to recur any of those lost one-of creatures later on.
Ends up finding Tireless Tracker. Can't do that just yet, but probably a nice one next turn. Plays Overgrown Tomb tapped. Gains a life to 22 on the 23 rather on the Courser. Ticks his Jace up and passes. Now Pulliam's going to draw that tracker. See at least one land in the hand and a Thoughtseize on top of the deck.
I like the no attack there, as it actually made it so Pulliam couldn't use Ibnu Rivulet to bring back Uro next turn if Pulliam were to just chump block with Satyr Wayfinder.
Yeah, that is nice. All right, so here's Tireless Tracker. Island makes a clue. Pulliam's going to sack that right away, draw this Thoughtseize. Knows he gets to Thoughtseize that tracker. Shows a Blooming Marsh on top of the deck. These players just have so much information about what's happening for both players on every turn. It's kind of wild.
Oh, yeah, just playing with the top of the deck revealed, tutors revealing cards, and in a lot of ways, just their graveyard being a sort of extension of their hand because of Uro and Jace Telepath Unbound.
Pulliam's Thoughtseize takes Magalhaes' tracker. Left Edgar empty-handed. And now we see Nissa, who shakes the world off the top. And Pulliam's at 12. These 3/3s, they can't quite attack through a Courser immediately, but it won't take too long. Ooh, this is nice. So he's going to use the Nissa, make some extra mana with his Breeding Pool, and actually just gets to make that a 3/3 and escape Uro on this turn. That's a huge swing for Magalhaes.
Oh, yeah, so we're seeing a 5-drop Planeswalker into, I don't actually know how to say the cost of Uro here, but a big 6/6 that draws cards.
Right. It feels disingenuous to call it a 3-drop, you
right.
know?
Ooh, look at that top card.
It's that Tameo. And the card in hand now is Fatal Push for Magalhaes.
This is really slipping away from Pulliam. This is a spot where Emrakul is a powerful card, but it's hard to say how much you could even screw up Edgar's battlefield.
Jace goes to 7, shrinking Pulliam's tracker. Pulliam's going to draw that Blooming Marsh. Shows another tracker on top. There's phases of the game where this stuff is fine and good. Feels a little late, though.
Yeah, it feels like the door is closing.
He's going to cast an Uro from hand. Draws that Tireless Tracker, goes to 15. Sees another Uro on top of the deck. With that Uro trigger, puts Blooming Marsh on the battlefield, makes a clue. A lot of small value things in this phase of the game. Magalhaes is starting to build big value, though. He's got Planeswalkers, ton of mana. Very well could Emrakul next turn. Pulliam's going to use the clue, draws that Uro. Going to play Watery Grave, which was now the top card of the deck. 17 off the Courser, makes another clue. Traverse the Ulvenwald.
Big pickup, but that might be a turn too late.
He might be far from Delirium at this point, too.
Ooh, how about that?
Swift End. Goodbye, Nissa. A little sigh of relief for Pulliam there.
Yeah, that's such a big deal. That was the difference between Edgar being able to make an Emrakul this turn and having to just kind of continue to snowball this advantage.
Pulliam to 15 off of that Swift End, and he passes. We see Magalhaes draws that Tamiyo and shows a Murderous Rider of his own on top of the deck. He knows that Pulliam has a backup tracker, though.
Two-headed giant, soon spectacular players. Your pairings for your
I just can't get over how perfect the information is in this matchup.
Yeah, this is a spot where Edgar recognizes that there's a strong chance Will can actually just Emrakul next turn. So he's trying to actually sculpt his turn around that fact.
I can see why our rounds are going over time. There's an attack with Uro. Magalhaes is going to draw. Reveals an Abrupt Decay on top.
Ooh, how do you feel about the Courser of Krufix Tamiyo Collector of Tales combo?
I'm too stupid. Explain.
Well, you see, when you roll up a Tamiyo, you have to name a card. And then if that card happens to be in the top 4 cards of your library, it is then added
By
to
chance.
your hand. Yeah,
if
who
by
knows?
chance.
So here, if Edgar were to astutely have a read that Abrupt Decay were atop his library, that could just break his way.
And on the way there, he can traverse because he doesn't really want the Abrupt Decay. But if there was something else he did want. But going to go ahead and tutor up that Emrakul, the Promised End, for now. The threat now officially very much looming. And there's not really much Pulliam can do about that because there's Emrakul and Tamiyo for Magalhaes.
This is all about inevitability. And, you know, if we see the Tamiyo come down here, that just turns off Pulliam's Thought Seizes.
Not bad. Yeah, these Planeswalkers have abilities, huh? Not just pluses and minuses.
No, we call those statics.
I'm learning. Right, Magalhaes is going to pass. Looks like we have some effects in draw step. Yeah, so this is actually a nice trick for Magalhaes. He stops Pulliam in draw step. Pulliam has drawn. There's a Tireless Tracker on the battlefield and a Courser Krufix. So you see that land on top. That's stranded. That's got to be Pulliam's next draw if you destroy something in the upkeep. He stops the landfall trigger there on the tracker, not the Courser itself. There's some other ways to play it. But he's going for the card advantage. Pulliam's going to play the backup tracker, then play that Overgrown Tomb, make 1 clue. But Magalhaes stopped it from being 2. Here's a traverse for Pulliam. Not interested in that Uro on the top of the deck. Wants to do better. Finds Basic Forest. Is that better?
Well, it looks like he might not have Delirium, so this could contribute to another Traverse being delirious, though.
Sure. Yeah, get that sorcery in the graveyard.
Who needs us to search your deck?
Yeah, combination of Demonic Tutor for Forest and Vampiric Tutor for Emrakul the Promised End.
Didn't even have to pay 2 life.
I love it when it's free. What was that? Is that Worldly Tutor?
Yeah.
Put a creature on top.
How do you feel about dueling Emrakuls?
I don't feel great. This is giving me some nightmare flashbacks, actually.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to pull out a writing utensil over here and try, in order to keep track of who's about to have what extra turns.
Oh, yeah. That can become a real mess. All right, Magalhaes is going to draw. He's going to play Overgrown Tomb. Shocking for it, but has plenty of life. Down to 25, up to 26 off the courser. Sees a Traverse on top, has Emrakul in hand. We might need a card types and graveyard tracker, too, with all the escaping. Got Edgar's going to shift things around. We have Creature, Planeswalker, Sorcery.
You know, I was thinking to myself, if the first player who Emrakuls can actually create a situation with Uro where you can make it so the other person can't cast Emrakul, but it looks like Edgar is going to get there first, and Pulliam just has, 11 lands on the battlefield?
Yeah, 13 makes it so you can't not cast it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be possible, right?
Right. Pulliam has that basic forest looming.
You can Stone Rain that Iptu Rivulet. That seems pretty minor, though. Just make him sack it. Unfortunately, just one. Right, Jace is going to minus. Going to flashback a Traverse. Magalhaes not interested in that Thoughtseize on top of the deck. Is interested in tutoring up a land.
Is that Fabled Passage?
I believe it to be.
Ooh, that could just count as 2 mana for an Emrakul, depending on how his graveyard's looking.
Yeah, it was the top row was card types. There is a breeding pool still in the graveyard, so he does have 4 currently.
Right.
The passage is nice for a reset with the courser, though.
Ooh.
Yeah, so plays a passage. There's another one on top of the deck. That's getting shuffled away. Magalhaes finds Island up at 29. It's kind of funny how large Magalhaes' life total is and how small Pulliam's is and how it doesn't seem to matter either way.
Right, this is a spot where, well, maybe not. Emrakul takes several hits.
That's true. And this Emrakul that Magalhaes is deploying, that's 1 for Pulliam. 13's greater than 10 last time I checked. Unlucky. Quick check on the mana and card types, but yeah, that Emrakul is good. Magalhaes taps out, but well worth it. And this is the card you were saying this matchup is all about. Pulliam's going to fire off that Rivulet Ed Step. Probably figures that's going one way on his turn anyway. Mills Magalhaes. And now Pulliam will take Magalhaes' turn.
And at this point, it is just Edgar's job to figure out how can he best sabotage Pulliam with his own resources.
Yeah, so the options he has, that Uro, probably not casting that one. Maybe if he feels like drawing a card could matter. He'll start by shocking a breeding pool off the top. There's another Uro. Third clue token on Pulliam's side of the table. Is there anything messed up Magalhaes can do with this Traverse?
So there's a not 0 chance Magalhaes could Traverse for Walking Ballista and just shoot it all at Pulliam.
My memory's a little fuzzy, but I want to say Pulliam milled over Walking Ballista in the early game.
That's entirely probable. There's so much going on here.
Yeah, we're coming up on the halfway point for the round. That's going to be relevant. If all the games look like this, you basically have to 2-0 or 1-0-1 the matchup.
Right, exactly. If you lose the first game, that is it's so hard to actually come back from.
Magalhaes confirming the rules on Emrakul the Promised End here. Pretty complicated card.
I have a feeling they're trying to figure out the turn order if there are dueling Emrakuls.
Sure, what happens if I Emrakul on an Emrakul turn? Does Pulliam then take his regular turn, or does Magalhaes take the turn that Pulliam takes for him next?
Yeah, this is a whole thing that I'm excited to hear what the judge has to say about.
It's been a couple years. I want to say turns loosely follow the rules of the stack, last in, first out.
Yeah, and, I'm just not sure if this ends up in a situation where that would mean, say, Edgar then takes 2 real turns in a row at the end of it.
It's a mess.
Yeah, say if Edgar then casts it here, controls Edgar's next turn, or Pulliam then controls Edgar's next turn, but Pulliam still has an extra turn. I don't even...
I mean, this is just like every board game night I had in college. A lot of stuff on the table, not clear whose turn it is.
Were you the best settler in all of Catan?
I played that game exactly once.
Ooh.
And yes, I retired undefeated.
Woo!
No, I don't want to toot my own horn too hard.
No, I mean, you're kind of... That's kind of what's going on here.
Magalhaes determines the worst thing he could traverse for to sabotage Pulliam. He wanted to find Satyr Wayfinder, but I think he had actually chosen to fail to find instead. Then we see a Traverse the Ovenwald right back on top. Magalhaes wanted to get rid of that one.
Well, with these clue tokens, you still could do that.
Yeah, very fair point. There's just 3 uncracked clues and no shortage of mana. Yeah, so he will crack the clue, draw Traverse. See how he wants to spew that. See an overgrown tomb on the top of the library. Very early on in the turn, Magalhaes played Pulliam's land for turn, so there's going to be no more of that. You don't mind leaving a land stranded on the top of the library, though. Korsh is going to attack. It's feeling aggressive, and now it's feeling dead. Emrakul is going to block that pretty easily. It's kind of nice controlling both sides of combat.
Call that the Master Warcraft?
That is a throwback. That's original Ravnica.
Oh, yeah. That was in my Ravnica release deck, and the only way I won games.
All right. Magalhaes is going to throw that Traverse in the graveyard, fail to find, an overgrown tomb right back on top of the library. Magalhaes is actually going to cast the Uro from hand, though. Draw that tomb. And Shocks to put that on the battlefield, so +3, -1, Pulliam back at 10. We see another Uro on top. Is Magalhaes trying to mill Pulliam?
It's possible. We haven't seen anybody count libraries.
He's cracking the clue to draw the Uro, and there's mana to cast that one, too. So we see Ishkana on top.
That's a big one.
Holds off on the last Uro in hand. He's going to leave that one there as Pulliam's going to take a regular turn.
There's a not-zero chance that what Edgar was drawing to there was the card Thoughtseize to try and make Pulliam Thoughtseize his own Emrakul.
Gotcha. 3 mana left over would be exactly enough.
Right.
Makes sense. And unfortunately for Magalhaes, that's the top card now for Pulliam.
Oof.
That is rough. Bunch of lands set to the side. I think we're going to see Dueling Emrakuls.
The long-awaited sequel to Dueling Banjos.
Dueling decks, Emrakul versus Emrakul. Me versus myself.
What was the lore thing? You just have to start ending words in Mrakul.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, dual decks versus M versus Mrakul.
Dual deck Makul, M versus Mrakul. I got hard to read a lot of those posts. All right, here is the big lady. Emrakul on both sides now. Now Pulliam's going to see how much he can sabotage Magalhaes.
Oh!
Couple fatal pushes and an abrupt decay.
So how do you like forcing Edgar to -2, -0 his own Emrakul and then crashing it into other Emrakul?
Woof. So this was a big play in Standard if it got to the point where it was Emrakul versus Emrakul and there were spider tokens. You would attack Emrakul into Emrakul and then assign all the damage to the spider. This is very similar to that, as you do see Magalhaes' Emrakul getting taken down by Pulliam's and the Jace.
Oof.
And then just this hand of Fatal Pushes Abrupt Decay is just going to go for all of Magalhaes' little critters here. Just left with the Jace on 2 and a Satyr Wayfinder. All right, And Magalhaes is going to take a regular turn. What can he do? Facing down to 13-13, but as you established before, that's a couple hits on Magalhaes.
Yeah, this is a spot where it's entirely possible that depending on what Pulliam ends up finding, Edgar can actually just apply pressure from here.
He'll escape Uro.
Look at how this game has turned. How all of a sudden it kind of feels like Pulliam has really shifted things.
Yeah.
Being the one with the last Emrakul standing, where we joke and say things to the effect of, yeah, Edgar can take a few hits, but being able to deal 33 in a couple of turns is no joke.
Absolutely.
It feels like Edgar should be further ahead.
He'll Thoughtseize. We see Ishkana and Uro. Get those spiders out of there. But yeah, this is a tough spot for Edgar now. Pulliam's going to draw Tamiyo of his own. See a Fabled Passage on top.
I wonder if there's a world, if you knew the Tamiyo was coming, if you're supposed to crash Emrakuls and then get back your Emrakul.
Yeah, let yours die.
Yeah.
And there is that real question, and this was a big thing you had to figure out when this mirror was popular in Standard, and it looks like this mirror is going to be relatively popular in Pioneer. Is it better to Emrakul first, or is it worse to Emrakul first?
Yeah, because here it just seems devastating. The fact that Edgar had the ability, I don't want to say the choice, but the ability to attack with his own Emrakul feels like it's kind of what did him in here.
Tamiyo is going to minus, picks up Tireless Tracker, Fabled Passage, play it off the top for Pulliam, gets a clue. See JVP on the top for him now.
Here we see Pulliam really start to snowball that advantage that was doing Edgar so much good earlier in this game.
Pulliam cracks the clue, draws the Jace, thinking about casting that. Abrupt Decay on the top. Clean answer to either Jace or the Uro. Jace is easy, though. Emrakul attacks that one down. We go back to Magalhaes, draws to one card in hand. Attacks with Uro. Goes to 34. Courser of Krufix quickly chumps for Pulliam. Magalhaes is going to put an Overgrown Tomb on the battlefield, cast that Murderous Rider that's been on an adventure for some time, and back to Pulliam. Draws that Abrupt Decay. Top card no longer revealed. Crushes off the battlefield. He will loot away Uro, get a Telepath Unbound of his own. What's Edgar's plan to win the match?
So at this point, it feels like he's really just drawing to another big Haymaker. That's the best way for him to actually push through damage at this point. It's also possible that, we kind of joked about it before, but decking might actually be an issue. You can't afford to roll up Tamiyo very much, for example.
Yeah, makes sense. Emrakul and Tamiyo attack. Tireless Tracker. That's a different card. See a chump block from the Wayfinder. 13, and Magalhaes still above 20. At 21, though. Uro will escape once again for Pulliam. Another Jace Fringe Prodigy on the top of the deck.
And it feels like we're reaching that point of no return for Edgar.
Pulliam's going to shock a Breeding Pool off the top.
Ooh.
Nissa who shakes the world. It doesn't look like it takes Pulliam long to close from here. Magalhaes is going to do a quick library count, but Pulliam's not being aggressive with that Tamiyo. Just going to leave that at 2. Should have more than enough cards.
Yeah, if Pulliam's actually respecting his own ability to deck out here, that's just going to change everything.
Yep, definitely being mindful. And you wouldn't expect anything different from Pulliam. Already off to a great start on the tour in 2020. Magalhaes is going to attack with Uro. Never mind. It's going to get Abrupt Decayed. And now Magalhaes concedes.
Yep, just saying, all right, I've had enough. We need to get this going. We need to play more games and have the time to actually finish them.
So just under 18 minutes, we see players going to sideboard. So Magalhaes wants to try to win quickly. Let's see if there's anything that can help here. The options: 3 Land of the Void, 2 Unmoored Ego, 2 Damping Sphere, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Sultai Charm, a Hostage Taker, another Tireless Tracker, an Agonizing Remorse, and an Abrupt Decay.
So I'm a big fan of specifically the card Agonizing Remorse here. That's a way to attack an Uro that's already been cast, as well as be a little bit better in terms of hand disruption than a Thoughtseize would be otherwise. I know mana efficiency is a big deal when you have these big mana strategies, but the added layer of being able to attack cards in the graveyard is something that I expect to actually come into play here a decent amount. Tireless Tracker is another one that we saw just do so much work in providing both players with so many resources that last game. And in a lot of ways, it wasn't always about the raw resources it provided, but a form of selection in that you just get to see a ton of cards, so you find the important ones more naturally.
Yeah, Tracker also just is one of the cards that can potentially close quickly, right?
Exactly. It's something where the turn after you cast it, let's say you cast it on 4, play a land, 5, you play a land, attack, crack your clues, and 5 to the dome is not nothing.
Pulliam's got an identical sideboard. Do you think there's anything play draw or wanting to run the clock out versus wanting to win quickly that you do differently in sideboarding?
I think for the most part, you're going to keep it the same. A lot of your reactive cards are things like Mystical Dispute, which aren't really going to play against the likes of Tireless Tracker, for example. We could end up seeing him more interested in things like Abrupt Decay, or Leyline of the Void is a card that can stop the fast Uro draws. And I'm not positive where he falls on trying to play more fair versus actually clown the graveyard synergies that the deck is leaning on.
Sure. Players looking at 7s. Pulliam pretty quickly sends his back. Magalhaes is going to keep on 7. That's what you want to see if you're trying to win a quick game in the mirror, right?
Oh, yeah. Mo. Go to 4. Go to 4.
Pulliam kept on 6. Magalhaes is going to open on Leyline of the Void and Thoughtseize. Very powerful start. We see Tireless Tracker, Fatal Push, Murderous Rider, 3 Shock Lands. We don't see Tireless Tracker anymore, though. Just Breeding Pool tapped on turn 1 for Pulliam. Magalhaes is going to fire off a Satyr Wayfinder and pick up an island. Turn 2 for Pulliam is going to be a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, which he will shock a Watery Grave to cast.
There's a nice pickup that fills in Pulliam's curve in a big way.
And back to Magalhaes. Plays that island. He's going to use an Uro. Goes to 21, puts in a Breeding Pool tapped. Back to Pulliam. So he has this 0-2 Jace the Merfolk Leader going because of that Leyline. But still good for filtering the draws, as you see him discard a Leyline that he picked up. A little worse to hard cast that one.
Yeah, you aren't ever really going to be that excited spending 4 mana to deal with the cards they're putting in their graveyard starting on turn 4.
Magalhaes is going to push the Jace and attack for 1, Pulliam to 17. Pulliam's going to shock to 15, and we'll cast another Leyline of the Void. So Leyline's on both sides, but Magalhaes does have a graveyard. 1
turn behind from preventing Uro from escaping as well.
Yeah, exactly 5 other cards in the bin right now. Courser of Krufix for Magalhaes. Thoughtseize on the top. Wayfinder attacks, Pulliam to 14. See what he can do about this.
And we see a Nissa hiding out in Edgar's hand. Having Nissa and Uro together is just such a power play if Edgar can get there.
Another Jace Vryn's Prodigy off the top for Pulliam. Both players know about a Fatal Push in Pulliam's hand. So Magalhaes probably wants to find a way to get that out before he escapes the Uro, or maybe just decides it's go time.
Yeah, this is a spot where this is Edgar's way of saying, I care more about trying to get to this Nissa.
Also, we're at the stage in the game where it might be harder to trigger Revolt. Swift End does take care of the Uro.
And that's with the trigger on the stack. This is paying a little bit of respect to the things that Edgar can find off the top here.
He draws Traverse the Elvenwald, plays a Fabled Passage off the top, attacks for 3 with the Wayfinder and the Courser. Top card's Opulent Palace.
All right, well, this is the way that getting a fast win happens for Edgar. We see Pulliam already down to 9.
Yeah, the Swift End plus that attack for 3, doing some work. Fabled Passage is going to find a swamp. I believe Magalhaes has communicated he's casting Thoughtseize. That's what happens. Goes to 24, takes that fatal push. Pulliam empty hand, empty graveyard. Casts Murderous Rider and passes. Can Magalhaes steal a quick one? There's that Nissa you mentioned. That's a great way to do it. Untap Breeding Pool. Make that a 3-3.
I would like to move to combat, if you please.
No blocks with the Rider. The lifelink's nice against the other creatures, but not quite good enough just against a 3-3 attacking, and Pulliam's going to take the hit, draw a card, and concede. Magalhaes has forced a game 3.
And that was, what, a 5-minute game, too? That
Very
was so
impressive.
different than what we saw the first game. It felt like Pulliam stumbled just a little bit too hard. Couple draws didn't break his way, and that's what Edgar needs to see in order to actually come back in this match.
Hit exactly what he needed to get into this game 3. Now we find out if we can close from here.
Right, because even though things are even, now both players are kind of at risk of just getting a draw.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible this next game we go in and Edgar kind of stumbles the way that we saw Pulliam do that last round.
And you can tell by the pace here, both players very aware and very much want to finish this game. No re-sideboarding, shuffle quickly. How are our opening hands? This time it's Pulliam on the play against Magalhaes mulliganing on the draw.
Well, I didn't mean to jinx it. Let the record show.
No ill will towards either player.
This might be one of those matches where you get the one good game out of the way early, and then you got a couple of them just pummeling each other.
Can Magalhaes keep on 6?
Looks about that way.
Yeah, thinking about what card to put on the bottom, or at least looking at what a combination of 6 for this hand might look like. He's kept, all right. Leyline for Pulliam, none for Magalhaes, so this feels like just a reverse of game 2 so far.
Yeah, I've seen this movie before.
Opulent Palace is the first land for Pulliam. Magalhaes is going to shock an Overgrown Tomb and fire off Traverse. So he goes 18 and finds Basic Island. That's actually the card he bottomed on his mulligan.
And this is a spot where it might have looked worse, but now when you know that your Traverse is not getting any better, you might as well just spend the mana on a spot where it's easy to do so.
Yeah, can't really get Delirious against a Leyline. Pulliam is firing off a Traverse of his own. He has a graveyard, but maybe just actually needs the land as he goes, finds, and plays Basic Island. Magalhaes is going to cast Agonizing Remorse here off that island here on 2. We see an Uro. Does that grapple with the pass, the second card? Jace Prince Prodigy, Fatal Push, Tireless Tracker. And I don't think he's going to do it, but he could exile the Traverse from the graveyard as well.
Sure. And Edgar's take here is going to change a lot based on the texture of his hand. I would imagine Uro is the card that we see going away, but that could change depending on how cold he is to one of these card advantage creatures.
Yeah, just kind of the default state because exiling Uro is so significant.
Exactly.
All right, so Uro was exiled. Pulliam's going to miss his third land drop, cast the Jace. Now it's on Magalhaes to answer that. He'll shock in a Breeding Pool as land number 3. And Sultai Charm, destroy target monocolored creature.
And there was actually a choice there because it could have also destroyed Leyline of the Void.
Yeah, destroy target enchantment, one of the other modes. All right, Satyr Wayfinder for Pulliam. That's going to find Blooming Marsh, so he does have a third land now. Probably don't see a lot of draw 2 cards, discard 1 with the Sultai Charm. And, all right, Magalhaes has a backup Sultai Charm. This one's going to deal with that Leyline.
Ooh, and look how he's able to fill his graveyard.
And then Fabled Passage goes and finds a swamp, casts a Thoughtseize. Yeah, instant land and sorcery all in the bin, and gets another look at Pulliam's hand. So the new information here is a Courser of Krufix has been picked up. But Magalhaes is going to take that Tireless Tracker.
And there's a point where one of the considerations is that Tracker is one of the ways that you actually lose in 8 minutes. You know, Edgar does not have a high life total here. He's Thoughtseize, he's cast Agonizing Remorse, is behind on the battlefield. Needs to make sure he can actually stay alive before he tries to win the game.
So we saw Pulliam cast the Courser, miss on land, actually just finds another Leyline on the top. Go back to Magalhaes. She's going to use an Uro, make a land drop. And that's Creature. That's Delirium, so he's going to traverse as well.
Usual suspects of card types, what I call that with a Tarmogoyf.
The easy ones.
Yeah.
Magalhaes at 15 off of that trigger. Now with 5 lands on the battlefield, goes and finds a tireless tracker of his own. Pulliam's going to draw that ley line, needs a land, another ley line on top.
Ooh.
That is ugly. Not only is it just bad the draw, but he's missing his 4th land drop.
Yeah, no, that is really just insult to injury.
He's going to fire off the grapple, wants to clean this up. All right, there's an Ipnu Rivulet and a Breeding Pool milled, and Thoughtseize left on top.
Hard to imagine taking anything but a land here.
Right. Strongly considering Breeding Pool. That and the Rivulet being looked at. He actually picks the Ipnu Rivulet and plays that.
Yeah, and if the idea here is the most taxing mana cost in your deck is Uro, you're going to want blue anyway. So having the utility of this is just fine when you already have 2 green sources.
Sure. Attack for 3, put Magalhaes to 12. On Magalhaes' turn, we see Tireless Tracker and Forest makes a clue. Pulliam's going to draw that Thoughtseize and then draw a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, or rather, that's the card on top of the deck.
Yeah, just putting it back in its sleeve.
It was going the wrong way.
It's unbound.
Get that bounded again. As we see Uro cast, the Jace now drawn, and a Fatal Push on top. Pulliam's still really struggling to make land drops, but he does trigger Revolt and gets the Fatal Push the tracker. 3 points knocks Magalhaes down to 9. He'll crack that clue. And we'll go back to Magalhaes.
Ooh, is that an Uro off the top? That could be big. That's the way to actually close a game with only 5 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, 6 4 times, that's 24. Has to worry about some blockers, though.
Quick math.
I can do the arithmetic.
The what?
Maths.
Oh, right. Okay, cool, good. Yeah, I'm on board.
Uro's going to escape. Magalhaes to 12. Down to 10 to shock a Breeding Pool. There's that Uro from hand. Up to 13. Life total's changing a lot.
And we see a Hostage Taker hiding out in Edgar's hand. That's a nice pickup here.
Woof.
You want to talk about really kicking someone down when they're behind.
Yeah, so Pulliam's going to draw that Fatal Push. Plays a Forest off the top. Unfortunately, sees another island after that. He's at 25.
Hard to even say if that's unfortunate with the mana problems he's been having.
Fair. Yeah, he's escaping Uro, so I suppose that island just goes right on the battlefield. Get some of those ley lines out of the graveyard. Leave 1. Keep that enchantment. So Pulliam's got to use the Rivulet to 24. Goes to 27 off the trigger. Puts that island on the battlefield. Now there's a Breeding Pool on top. Probably not making any good attacks on this turn, as we see Jace Vryn's Prodigy cast and Pulliam passes.
Now here are a ton of targets for a Hostage Taker, and
Oh, yeah.
not a lot of time to pick.
It's kind of funny how bad it is to hostage take an Uro.
Oh yeah, and especially because you know about a Fatal Push that Pulliam drew as a result of Corsair of Krufix, you're heavily incentivized to immediately deploy whatever you do, but that just puts Uro back in Pulliam's graveyard.
Right.
And you really don't want to loot with a Jace Vryn's Prodigy that would transform. That does not go well.
Yeah, it leaves the battlefield and returns under its owner's control as a Planeswalker.
Right.
All right, so Magalhaes is going to start by attacking with Uro. Up to 16 and puts a Blooming Marsh on the table. Gets chumped by Satyr Wayfinder. And what is the follow-up? It's going to be the Hostage Taker. It grabs the Jace. Magalhaes casts that. Like you're saying, that's probably just going to sit there.
Well, so let's look at the graveyard. I only see 1 Uro there, and when Edgar has dueling Uros, it's actually kind of easy to keep your graveyard below 5 cards. So maybe it's just a Merfolk looter.
Yeah, I suppose the graveyard's very empty right now. It's a very good point. Pulliam's going to attack with his own Uro up to 31. Draws Nissa, who shakes the world. That's a nice one.
Oh, yeah, and with Pulliam having so much more life than Edgar at this stage in the game, it's hard to feel bad about what's going on. You can actually just apply pressure and not worry about what Edgar's sending back your way.
Shocking a Breeding Pool puts Pulliam to 30. Looks like Hostage Taker is going to do some chump blocking for Magalhaes. We see a Thoughtseize from Pulliam. We get a look at Edgar's hand. Actually, might have Fatal Push in response. Thought better of it, though. Reveals the hand of Emrakul, Leyline, Fatal Push.
Realized that taking Fatal Push is probably good for Edgar.
Right. Now, you want to maintain that 13-13, maybe. Pulliam says no thank you. Emrakul is the take. Now Pulliam's going to cast that Nissa. It's post-combat. He drew it in combat, but it's still pretty dang good. It's going to turn an island into a 3-3. Back over to Magalhaes. Just under 2 minutes in the round. Pulliam will Fatal Push that Jace Prince Prodigy, actually.
And this is just to not give Edgar the ability to have Revolt on his own turn and kind of forcing Edgar's hand.
Yeah, looting that Leyline away is probably something Edgar wanted to do. Edgar's going to push that island and then draw for turn. Hand is Leyline and one other. Pre-combat, casts Leyline of the Void. It's going to attack Nissa. Goes to 19, draws a card. Courser chump blocks, and that's going to be exiled. That's the reason that he pre-combated that Leyline. So we'll make sure that it gets in the right pile. There we go.
Top card Murderous Rider over on Pulliam's side. Oof.
Yeah, Magalhaes doesn't have a lot going on, and that cleans up the Uro problem. Ooh, and Leyline of the Void from hand for Pulliam.
And in a lot of ways, this is just checking boxes.
Uses the Nissa to make double greens. That's why I only tapped 2 lands there, and now that land becomes a 3-3. Uro and Forest attack. Pulliam to 31 again. Fatal Push on land once more for Magalhaes. Uro's going to connect, though. Magalhaes to 10 as we go back his way.
And this is the strength of Nissa. This deck is so good at creating lands with Uro, and Nissa gives you something to do with those lands.
This time Uro makes a non-fatal attack on the Nissa. Does knock her to 1 loyalty. And Swift End will solve the Uro. Exiled because of the Leyline, which is a nice spot for Magalhaes as he deploys the Murderous Rider as well.
Gotta feel bad about getting a clean hit in with your 6/6 creature on a Planeswalker and it's sticking around after it is also traded for 2 of your cards.
I can't tell you how many times I have just conceded to Nis having 6 or 7 loyalty.
Yep.
My creatures are much smaller than that. And Uro not quite getting it done, like you said. That is a beat. Magalhaes had 11 at the end of the turn after gaining some life, losing some life with the Swift End. And Pulliam now is a little bit tight on mana once more. The Nissa helps a little bit, but there's only 1 Forest on the table.
Right, and now that we're in time, it's really hard to imagine either player effectively ending this game.
Yeah, turn 1 is Pulliam's. He's going to try. He's going to wake up Blooming Marsh and Swift End, get that Uro out of there. And these 3/3 lands, they do attack well into Murderous Rider. And Pulliam's going to make that attack. No interest in blocking. Magalhaes goes to 8. I think if anything closes this game, it's that Nissa.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's the way to make it happen.
Turn number 2 is going to be Magalhaes. He will draw. Remember that Uro was exiled. Both players have a Leyline of the Void at this stage in the game. They didn't start that way, but they sure are there now. Here's an Uro from hand. That's okay. Goes to 11. Ooh. Draws Nissa, who shakes the world of his own. In a different game, it might matter that his is higher loyalty, but I think we're just looking at 3/3s holding each other off right now. Wakes up Blooming Marsh. So 3/3 Blooming Marsh on both sides. And here is a Fatal Push on Pulliam's Blooming Marsh. Ooh, and no, Murderous Rider just gets to kill the Nissa if this works.
Big game.
You see Pulliam tap the marsh. Is it a spell? Or it is. All right. Fatal pushes the land, but the Nissa does go down. Murder Strider takes care of that. Magalhaes to 13 off the lifelink. And Pulliam just 4 lands now. He's had 3 of his lands fatal pushed.
Yeah, so that's one of the things about these Planeswalkers that's different from, say, Garruk Primal Hunter, is it does actually demand a resource in order to create one. So in a lot of ways, it's upgrading your resources rather than actually creating them.
A little bit of bad news, though, as we see turn 3 as Pulliam's. It looks like Magalhaes is taking control of the game, but he's nowhere near closing it.
Right. This is definitely a spot where, if you're in Pulliam's position, it's difficult to even concede, even though you're behind, because, you know, an Emrakul or something in that vein off the top over the next few turns is actually just going to be enough to catch you back up.
It is a tough spot. He's going to traverse. And then looks like the find is going to be Tireless Tracker. You see some shortcutting. Find, Tireless Tracker, play it, play a Blooming Marsh for hand, and make a clue token. And now the turn is Magalhaes'. Had a land in hand, drew a spell. Don't have a good look at what it is. Determine it's either green, black, or blue. Because it's a Sultai deck.
Well, there are actually colorless spells in this deck. So, you know, jot that down.
I had an opponent on Magic Online this week cast Horribly Awry against me. And when I couldn't Mystical Dispute it, I was so
awesome.
mad. I was so mad.
2 kinds of people.
Nissa's going to go to 7, wake up that Swamp for Magalhaes. Swamp and Rider will attack. Pulliam's going to soak it, go to 24. Magalhaes to 15. And there's only 1 turn left in this game, and it's Will Pulliam's, and that's where we're going. Turn number 5. Fabled Passage,
Ooh.
make a clue. Tireless Trackers, it gets big quick. It can attack for 6 on this turn, but that's not quite 15.
Quick math. Ooh, arithmetic. That's the word you used?
Maths.
Maths, the uppity word.
Isn't that just different countries call it math? Isn't it just cultural to call it maths? In England, they do maths.
I've never been.
With the metric system.
What?
Pulliam's going to crack a clue. Tracker of 4-3 now. Gonna crack another clue. 2 counters on the tracker. So I don't want to get too into the nitty-gritty because it's very boring. I hate this part of the game. But when you talk about who concedes, you can't look at any hidden zones. So actually just drawing 3 cards and making an argument for why you're going to win.
That's just kind of what you got to do.
Right. This is my hand. How do you feel about it? Do you want to draw? You know, we can end the game. And we don't really need to see this. All right? There's no way of knowing how long this